Hello, I'm Dr. Tom, and welcome back to The Myth Within. The other day, I was doing a little bit of research, and I came across a wonderful biblical verse that just stood out to me, and I wanted to take a little time to discuss it, especially as it relates to the psychology, how we go within to find the true passion, that true fire that brings out the best in us so that we could find and ultimately create the world that we wish to experience in our life. The verse is Matthew chapter 17, verse 20, and it reads, "For truly I say to you, if you have faith the size of a mustard seed, you will say to this mountain, 'Move from here to there,' and it will move, and nothing will be impossible for you." Matthew chapter 17, verse 20. What could you do with a little faith? In this passage, I'm reminded of the true nature of faith. It's belief in the unknown, belief in those powers that are internal that we may have not quite manifested yet. And as I look at a lot of the despair that seems to be prevalent in the world, I'm really captivated by the fact of how little faith there is, how little belief there is, especially in the capacity we have to better ourselves. That leads me to a fundamental question. Is this part of the human condition? Yes, faith can waver. We could find disbelief or reasons to not believe the true strengths that lie within, or maybe we may have had some negative experiences in our life that create a lack of faith in our capacity to move in a general direction. But is this truly part of the human condition? Or is this an invitation to something to come, something that we could begin to experience, honor, and then let go of in a greater capacity to realize the true strengths that lie at our hand? I often talk about the concept of emotion, emotion, dash motion, as equaling energy in motion. It really is the energy that's present within us that is edging us to get out of ourselves. It's trying to get out. So if the emotion is very sharp and jagged, very high frequency wavelengths, we may be feeling something like anger, despair. These feelings can create fear, even. These feelings can create this very jolty experience that really is set up to warn us of the dangers that are present. However, a lot of times what happens psychologically is because we integrate emotion or emotions with storylines, we tend to recapitulate those storylines even though they do not currently exist in the moment. Oftentimes, I call this making a mountain lion out of a house cat. Now, while it may be a fearful experience to run into a mountain lion walking down the road, most of the time we may not be subjected to that. However, our psychology, as it has developed over the millennia in the need to survive as a species, we tend to trust our emotions for face value of what they are. However, when fear becomes prevalent or anger becomes prevalent, the high frequencies of these emotions negate rational thought. And so fear and anger within itself is not necessarily a negative emotional state. It's not negative energy per se. It's a higher frequency that is driving the person to engage a survival response, or in the case of what we know for fear or anxiety, it could be fight or flight. Now, these emotions differ from the lower wavelengths, of which even sadness could be a lower wavelength because it's dwelling, it's slow, it makes you go within. And ultimately, I believe that's why in grief counseling, what ends up happening is as a person moves through the various constructs of grief, whether it be disbelief, bargaining, or anger, this eventually leads into a self reflective capacity that helps the person to break through the other side. And so ultimately, your slower moving wavelengths, such as happiness, even sadness, create the means by which integration can occur to find that inner contentment or that inner peace that we seek. Now, a lot of times people may yearn for happiness, which is a normal response, and I can't tell you how many times I hear that as being the general wish fulfillment that most individuals seek, is this idea of happiness. However, what is that? And if you're focused on happiness, ultimately you feel there's a lack without, so are you moving on a more negative wavelength? This is how you begin to utilize these wavelengths or energy emotion to get to know yourself, to get to know that seedling of faith that may be bursting within or just coming out of its shell to try and find its nourishing sun. And as the seedling begins to try and find the nurturing aspect of the sun and brings with it the nutrients that we support it with, we ultimately feel another high frequency emotion, which is not negative at all, and that would be love, of which encompasses all of these other emotions. And so when we have that high frequency, we want to stay within it. However, at times, the high frequency has to exist with the lower frequencies as well as the higher frequencies on the negative plane. And so when we begin to look at the energy as it moves us towards whatever end it's trying to propagate itself, we're in a process of developing faith. We're in a process of developing belief in an unknown. You can't point to an emotion and say that is. You can only come to it by a general feeling, which that feeling, as we all know, may be a very different feeling than what other people feel. For instance, love for a child versus love for a spouse. These are two completely different forms of love, yet we both can only explain it by this concept of categorization called love. Getting to know our general beliefs and the inner landscapes of our soul is the journey behind self-realization. Now, in this biblical verse, we find that faith is at a foundation, and all of faith, I believe, is really belief in an unknown. We don't even know aspects of ourself, yet alone aspects of this higher order. And so, as the myth within would examine, is how is this inner myth, or in this case, this inner biblical verse, working the essence of your soul? A little bit of faith is needed to work any area of life. Even the faith the size of a mustard seed can create monumental volition for a person to begin to initiate their journey towards self-realization. As Lao Tse once said, a journey of 1,000 miles begins with the first step. What will naturally emerge from the course of just getting to know that first step within yourself? As always, my friends, blessings. May your journey bring joyful feelings and emotions as you advance confidently in the direction of your dreams. And thank you for joining me. Bye.